Miss Paul, I'm sorry. Y'all be good. Oh, guys. Y'all be good sitting there. That's a lot of kids for her.
How are you? Right. Here, right?
That's odd. There's no battery.
That is very odd.
Something needs some double A's.
Remote's at home.
Oh, I got one more.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, takes one here.
I got the pencil.
often. I used to go.
You're just gonna rip it up. You ripped up so much. Yeah, but.
It's good to see all of you here tonight. Let's stand and worship together.
No, you're.
It was like a fire.
Gathered in your name, calling out to you.
Tabor Baptist Church, Wednesday night.
Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our brain. And open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our brain.
We're going to have prayer and take up our offering. Don't forget all the offering goes to our youth department. And so let's pray together tonight. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for our time together tonight as we praise you and sing songs to you. And God, look at what's going on in our convention. And God, we are excited about what you're doing here in our church. And God, it's been a good week, and it's been a week we have looked forward to for a long time. And God, we just thank you for the progress this week. Ask your blessings as we continue on in this project and this mission that you've called us to. Bless the gift that's been received tonight. Bless the gift to the giver. And God, that you would be honored and glorified. In your name we pray. Amen.
Couldn't feel me.
Hey, you guys clapped pretty good there. Good job. Good job. Good job. It's okay. It's okay. Give yourselves a hand. person here. Lord, we pray that you would bless tonight, Lord, as the children and the teenagers split out of here and go into their respective rooms, Lord, I pray that you'd be those that will be teaching tonight, Lord, and bring the word. And for Pastor Matt, Lord, his message in here, I just pray that you would use this time, Lord, to strengthen us, to draw us closer to you and closer to each other. In your name we pray. Amen.
Youth and children, y'all are dismissed. And thank y'all so much. Don't forget, Vacation Bible School starts Sunday night, kids. Sunday night, 6 o'clock. Vacation Bible School. What's that? Work day on Saturday. That is right. Work day on Saturday, decorate the rest of the church. And we are glad that you are here tonight. Phil, it is so good to see. Listen, we hadn't seen Phil in a number of months at the food bank, and he drove in last week, and I about came out unglued seeing Phil. Good seeing you tonight, Phil. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being here. What we're going to do tonight is I'm going to recap what happened at the convention in Anaheim, California. And you may go, well, why are we taking a whole night to do this? It is important to know, if you ever told somebody you go to church at Mount Tabor, sometimes, or most of the time, the follow-up question may be, what kind of church, right? What kind of church? Well, hopefully you proudly answer, well, I'm Southern Baptist, okay? And I am Southern Baptist for two reasons. Number one, by birth, we've always been Southern Baptist. But number two, I believe Southern Baptists are the most closest to what the church should be, and of any denomination or group of churches in the world. So I think we're really close. We're not perfect. Anaheim proved we're not perfect. But there were some important decisions made and some important issues unresolved, which will be hopefully, if not resolved before next year, we will resolve them in New Orleans next year. But let's talk about Anaheim. It was out in Anaheim, California. That was one reason why I didn't go this year. I looked, I tried to go, I tried to find like cheap flights. There isn't a cheap flight to Anaheim, California. So it's going to be in New Orleans, Louisiana next year. And that's easily either drive or a short flight. So I'll go to New Orleans next year and be a part of the convention as a messenger from Mount Tabor Baptist Church. We had about 8,000, I think the highest number was 8,089 registered messengers, which sounds like a lot. But the year before that in Nashville, we had over 20,000 registered messengers. So much smaller group of people that actually made the decisions. And of those 8,000, not many of them, even though they were messengers, did not vote. So that's who was kind of making some big decisions. They made pretty much every decision, every way that they voted would have been the way I would have voted. You can't vote proxy. You have to be in the room. So there were some people that went all the way to Anaheim, California, but they may have been out in the hallway when a vote happened, and you don't get to come in and cast your vote or make it up. If you're not in the room when the vote's taken, your vote doesn't count. So for some of those people, I want to go, listen, you stay home, let me go, because I would have been in the room, when the votes happened. But there were a couple of really big issues that the convention dealt with this year, and one of them was the sex abuse and prevention. And there were 2 recommendations approved. Now, this stems back from a newspaper article, and I don't want to get too in the weeds, but I want you to understand the backstory to why we ended up doing this in Anaheim. A couple of years ago, the Houston Chronicle published a list of people that worked in Southern Baptist churches who had committed some form of sexual abuse. Now, that could have been on children, it could have been on adults, and they were a little liberal with who they picked. Okay, so let me give you one example. People were charged, highly suspected of that, or actually convicted of it. Okay, so you could have been one of those. But it also used people like a guy named Bill mowed the yard at First Baptist Houston, and 10 years later he committed a sex offense against a woman. And even though he wasn't mowing the yard or going to church when he committed the act, because he used to mow the yard at First Baptist Houston, therefore he was an SBC sex offender. That's really a bad connection, okay? So some of the 300 names were that type of connection, okay? But part of the problem was there was this list of names that some folks in Nashville kind of kept private, and they didn't tell anybody. And they kept denying that this list was out there, and we found out it was out there. So last year in Nashville, we commissioned a task force called the Sex Abuse Task Force to look into and bring back recommendations. And we hired a group called Guidestone, not the insurance people, okay? So Guidestone is our SBC retirement insurance arm. But this is another Guidestone that did a in-depth study and interviews and published about a month ago a 300-page document of the sex abuse allegations and problems within the SBC. Okay, which was fine. Now, the number one name in the group in the report is Johnny Hunt, Dr. Hunt. And now, if you read the report, it's pretty sensational. Dr. Hunt has come out and given a statement, and the church has to deal with it. Okay, like Woodstock has to deal with it. Well, the report comes out about a month ago, and so it has all these, it had like 10 recommendations. Right before the convention, about a week before the convention, this same company, Guidestone, tweeted out a picture of the LGBTQ flag and said that they stood with their LGBTQ employees and da-da-da. Well, come to find out, I don't think everybody knew this, the people that hired him knew it, Guidestone isn't a Christian company. They don't even view sexuality the way that we view sexuality. So then there was a big cry for why did we hire this company, right? Why did we hire them when there are Christian companies that can do the same thing? They are the leaders when it comes to this. So that was one of the reasons why we chose to, I guess they chose to use them. Tommy Green in the state of Florida released a statement, said we wouldn't hire them because they don't share our values, they don't share our view of sexuality or gender identity, and he recommended that neither did the SBC. I agree with Dr. Green, but I'm also okay with what they did, and here's why. Because the report was written from a lost person's perspective. So if they're going to be critical, we want them to be critical. Now, we can always look through and go, okay, that's a worldview bias, so we maybe not so much. Of the recommendations that they made, only 2 were brought up before the convention. So we didn't take everything that they said as gospel, right? We just took 2 of them. Number 1 was this. The Volunteer Abuse Reform Implementation Task Force. We're actually forming a group with that title, the VARITF. I don't know what they're going to call it. This group will be a 1-year task force that will rotate new people every year that will monitor the second thing that we approved. Okay, so we approved 2 of the reforms. This was one. This is basically an oversight group that will oversee the SBC on all matters sexual abuse. So the Sex Abuse Task Force was only for 1 year. Their job is done. They get to stop doing that. Okay. Now this here's how we're going to implement all this stuff. Here's how we're going to make sure all this stuff is right and nobody else gets hurt. Okay. So this task force is kind of an overseer kind of idea. So that motion was brought up and it was passed. The second one, which was the one that was the most intriguing and the most demand and cry for, was a ministry check, I should say website, not website. Basically a clearinghouse. So if any pastor or anybody within the SBC church, whether a volunteer or pastor or whatever, they do something wrong, it will get reported by the state to this clearinghouse, which will be managed by a third-party independent group to protect innocent people, right? To protect those wrongly accused or whatever. So, let's say 5 years from now, y'all looking for a new pastor or whatever. We're looking for a new whatever. We would be able to, and we got a name, okay? Let's say we got a name, Bill Smith. And we're going to we're going to check this website. Oh, wait a minute. Bill's got 3 accusations from Tennessee. That's not somebody that we're going to deal with, right? So it becomes a clearinghouse for anybody working within an SBC church. This would have made sense to have this years ago, right? We haven't had that. Instead, there was a secret list that finally got revealed. So this is the way that they've decided to go, is this kind of ministry clearinghouse website. That task force I mentioned right there is going to oversee the operation and the structure and the development of this website. So you'll be able to clear people through that. Oh, they don't have any violations. So then the church, think about that, then the church can say, not only do we do our own background check, we also cleared them through the clearinghouse of the SBC, and so it's a double layer of protection for the church. Okay? So that's the sex abuse task force. That's what they did, what they were responsible for, and only 2 of the recommendations of the task force, or of Guidestone, the investigative group that we hired, that's what we approved. Okay? So any questions about that? It's pretty cut and dry. Yep.
Well, now you said that they would keep a record of accusations.
They would. So
That's kind of bad because we know there's false accusations made out there.
I'm sorry, credible accusations. I do believe they use the word credible accusations.
That's still a little scary.
It is. So let me give you an example of a credible accusation that would probably make the website. Okay? So there recently was a guy who was pastoring in the state of Florida. Okay? And he was serving in a bivocational role as a prison guard in a women's state prison. Florida State Prison. True story. Well, it was found out that him, this pastor, and 4 other guards, so these 5 guards, were doing things inappropriately with the women inmates. Okay, so let's just say that. Well, it was revealed that they had this kind of quid pro quo with the female prisoners. But before the state could step in and do anything, this guy resigns. Well, it solved the state's problem because he was no longer working for the state. Okay, so he's pastoring this church. The church doesn't know what's going on,
He
right?
hasn't done anything illegal in the eyes of the law? Quid pro quo with prisoners?
So they hadn't got to that point
Okay.
before he says, I'm out.
Okay.
I'm just going to step out of the way. I'm going to quit. Okay. I guess maybe the state said that solves the problem for us. We don't have to investigate him. We don't have to fire him. He's gone. Okay. Well, one of the women that this guy, this pastor, was having sex with in prison gets out, but she's killed in a car wreck after she gets out of prison. Her father calls Tommy Green and says, did you know that one of your pastors is one of those guards and he was doing stuff with my daughter who was killed in a car wreck? Tommy Green calls the pastor and says, does the church know? No, I've asked for forgiveness. There's no reason for the church to know. And Tommy said, this is how this is going to work. I'm going to be there Sunday. If you don't tell the church, I will. So Sunday passes, Tommy calls him back, he says, no, Tommy says, you got to tell him Sunday. He calls him, no, I didn't tell him. Tommy says, fine, I'm going to be there Sunday. If you don't tell him, I'm going to tell him. Well, I'm going to resign. So he quits the church instead of having to tell the church all that was going on in the prison. Okay? So, nothing was ever investigated. He was never convicted. He was never even arrested. But there is substantial evidence or reasonable suspicion that something inappropriate, that would make the website.
Okay.
That's the word. Credible evidence that something happened would make it. So if you typed in his name, some church going to call this guy, let's check this guy. Oh, and it may have a note, call Tommy Green, kind of thing. So that's the credible evidence. It's not a middle school girl accused, the youth pastor of touching inappropriately, and there's no evidence, no history, and 3 people knew it didn't happen, right? So that's not going to make. So that's where the difference between credible, because we do know in accusations today. I mean, I was accused of that at Victory, and right that semester, my last semester, they accused me of that, and I was like, y'all crazy. Because I got a ministry outside of the school, and then when he went back and he checked out the story, he said, no, it wasn't you. I said, I told you that at 8 o'clock this morning. There wasn't, anyway. So that's the credible evidence. Evidence, yeah. Okay? So that's a good step. It was overwhelming. In fact, when they were getting ready to vote these two things in, Dr. Litton, who was the president, said, we want to be sensitive as we discuss these next two items. There are survivors and victims in the room. So we want to be careful how we talk about them and how you talk among people that you're sitting next to, because you may not realize that on the other side of you is a victim and they're hearing you make jokes or whatever, whatever. And so he said, just so you know that, like this is like really serious. Let's all be adults at this point. So they had a motion in a second, and they said, microphone 8A or whatever. And this young gentleman stands up, and here's what he says. I call for the question. He didn't even allow it to be discussed. And everybody cheered because it protected everybody in the room. In the business thing, a call for the question means there's no more discussion, vote. So they went ahead and voted on the first one. Well, they went to do the second one, and the parliamentarian stepped up. And he said, now listen, I know what one of y'all is about to do. You're about to call for the question. But don't call for the question if we need to discuss it, because it may look like we're just not wanting to discuss it. Right? We're trying to hide something. But if you feel like it doesn't need to be discussed, then you have every right to do that. So the second one came out, and somebody stepped up and said, I do not believe it needs to be discussed. I believe the consensus in the room is what it is. I call for the question. Everybody cheered, and they passed 90% or more on both of those. So clear message sent by the convention of, yeah, we made some mistakes, but we're going to protect as best we can moving forward. So that was the big stuff, okay? That was probably the more newsworthy stuff, was the sex abuse thing, because it was, given out. Now, the next thing that we dealt with was what many people called the liberal drift of the convention. Okay. Everybody take a big, deep breath for just a second. There is no liberal drift in the convention. We are not drifting liberal. We're not walking liberal. We're not running liberal. We're not embracing liberal. We are conservative Southern Baptists. It was made clear over and over and over again how conservative we are. There is no liberal drift. Now, there are your extreme conservatives that would say, oh, you're drifting liberal because you elected Bart Barber as your president. Bart Barber doesn't get any more conservative than you can get. He's just that. But here is Bart Barber. He is our new president of the Southern Baptist Convention. So pray for Bart Barber. He has a 1 year, maybe 2 years. You only run 2 times in a row as a president. And here's why many people love Bart Barber and did not vote for Tom Askow, because he was the runner-up. It was a 60-40 split. Bart Barber is from a small town and a small church in Texas. It is the first small to medium-sized church pastor we have elected in many years. Every other Southern Baptist president has always been a mega church guy. Well, 70% of our churches are our size, but we're represented by the top 2%. Bart Barber is one of us. He is a small town pastor. In fact, somebody put on Twitter, I went to his website and he only has 2 other staff members. It was great. I think he runs about 400 in church.
How did he get elected? Because usually you need that big area of
Yeah.
influence to get elected.
Well, he was nominated by the right guy, and the other guy, Tom Askow, was nominated by Mike Stone. Okay, without going into the weeds, I thought we had a win-win. In fact, I even told you I think we have a win-win. When I saw Mike Stone nominate Tom to be president, I wanted to yell at my computer and go, vote for Bart, don't vote for Tom. Because Tom is in what's called the CBN, the Cooperative Baptist Network, and he's a good guy, but Mike Stone is not a good guy. Like, he tried to split the convention. He did all kinds of stuff when he was on the executive committee. Mike Stone needs to go be a Methodist, in my book. And so
Hey, the Methodists are trying to get back to more conservative.
they are. He needs to go join the liberal Methodists.
Yeah.
So it came down to that. Bart Barber got his name out there pretty early. There were 2 last-minute nominations for president. They didn't get any. They got like 4% or something crazy. So Bart Barber is a conservative. He's a small-town Texas guy. He won 60 to 40%. Now, some people will be like, they even said on Facebook page, "Oh, I'm leaving the convention." You know what I told them? Go. Leave. Because if all you're going to do is badmouth us, then go join the CBN, go join the Methodists, I don't care. But the convention is strong. Bart Barber is going to do a great job as our president. And you may go, what does the president do for the convention? He appoints people to committees. Committees steer those organizations, keeping them conservative. That's how we got back in the early 80s, the conservative resurgence. Prior to that, it was the president appointed liberals that were taking us, that was a liberal drift. And in the early 80s, the conservative resurgence, basically we got a conservative elected president, and it snowballed from there. We got conservatives on all the boards. We got conservative trustees at all of our seminaries. Listen, when they took over the seminaries, they went in and they fired. If you did not commit to the Baptist faith and message, if you did not commit to Genesis 1:1 as a creative act, if you did not believe Jesus is the only way to heaven, you were fired on the spot. Goodbye. And there were many professors that walked out of Southern because of it, which is fine, because they were liberal, they weren't conservative. They didn't believe, you had to also believe that God's word was inerrant, and many of them did not. So that's where we are. Now, so that was part of the liberal drift, is people thought Bart Barber is going to stay, but Bart Barber is conservative. Now, Tom probably would have been fine. I just don't like Mike Stone. So I couldn't vote for a guy that was nominated by Mike Stone. But there was a big issue, and Terry Dawson's not here tonight. He would love for me to have to talk about this, because he would just watch me melt and squirm and think. Women in ministry was a big issue. Okay? Now, don't take notes, Debbie. She's going to be asking me questions in again. This became an issue because of Saddleback Church. Now, if you don't know anything, Saddleback Church is the largest SBC church that we have. They have about 25 worship services every weekend on their campus. They have a Hawaiian service, a Korean service, a Spanish service, a Japanese service, 10 American service. I mean, just crazy amounts of ministry. Rick Warren, you may know him from Purpose Driven Life, if you ever read that book. He also wrote a book called Purpose Driven Church, okay? And he developed and designed this idea called the Purpose Driven Church. And he goes out to California, to Orange County, California, and he goes out there with him, his wife, and like 3 couples. And they start Saddleback Church. And now it's the largest Southern Baptist church that we have, and there's thousands and thousands of people. In Orange County alone, he has started 90 churches. They've only started 110 churches in Orange County in the 25 years that he's been at Saddleback, that he started Saddleback. And he started 90 of them. At the convention this year, they had a whole room for mental health counselors, to help anybody, pastor, layperson, who was struggling with anything, including victims of sexual abuse to struggle with them, all funded by Saddleback Church. They're an amazing church, an amazing pastor. But about a year and a half ago, they ordained 3 women to be pastors. And right now, all of our skin starts to crawl, and the hair on the back of Debbie's head starts to stand up, right? And she's just thankful that she has hair on the back of her head to stand up, right? And we all shudder. But here's the issue. It's egalitarianism versus complementarianism. Okay? Now, this will not be on the test later on, but let me explain to you what these 2 words mean. Because these are very, very important words. Egalitarianism and complementarianism. Okay? So when you get home tonight and tell your loved ones, what y'all love about church? We talk about egalitarianism and complementarianism. Egalitarianism, do not say amen until I'm done. Okay? Egalitarianism says that all men and all women are absolutely equal in the eyes of God. Which means that a woman can serve as pastor. Because a woman is the same as a man. See, before I added that last part, you all wanted to go amen.
Because the Bible says God sees us as neither male nor female, Greek nor...
Right. But let's go back to Adam and Eve. Was Eve created to be a mirror image of Adam or to be a helpmate of Adam? Enter complementarianism. That men and women are created different and they are to complement each other. That is, I'm not complete without Shauna. Shauna is not complete without me. We complement each other. I'm like a child and she's the adult in the relationship, right? We complement each other, right? So what happens in the church is some people say, well, especially our liberal friends, egalitarianism, that is a woman can serve as pastor. And so they're crying saying that Saddleback must go liberal, they're egalitarianism. Okay? And here's what Rick Warren says. Number one, Rick Warren has 18 elders of Saddleback Church. And those 18 elders are all men because he says they're required to be men according to Titus 1:9. So the 3 women they ordained as pastors, one was a youth pastor who had worked with their youth for 20 years at Saddleback. One was a children's pastor who had worked for 17 years or so with their children. And the third was a women's pastor who had been working with the women's ministry. None of them were ordained to be the pastor of the church. Okay? So that brings up the big argument at the convention. Pastor or pastor? So, last year's convention, there was a motion made to disfellowship Saddleback Church. That is, kick them out of the convention. It is the dumbest, stupidest thing we could do. But they did it anyway. And so, for 2 days, they ripped Rick Warren apart and Saddleback apart. Everybody wanted to get up and make a motion and hear their own voice. Next thing you know, Rick Warren stands up. He's there. And he says, this is most likely my last convention, the way things are going. So let me read to you. I wrote a love letter to the convention. And y'all, if you want to go to YouTube and put love letter to the convention by Rick Warren, it is beautiful. It talks about all the ministry that Saddleback has done. And he said, I came out here with nothing, but NAM supported us. And today we're Saddleback Church. We could not be where we are without the Southern Baptist Convention. And he said, I understand the difference between the office of pastor and the role of a pastor. That is, yes, a man has to be the pastor of the church, the lead pastor, the senior pastor, whatever we call them. His elders are all men. There isn't a single female elder. But we have, and what he says is, our pastors do not preach, our elders preach. And then Saddleback has this layer of ministry people that they call pastor. Okay? Some people believe that fight against Saddleback. Our church is wrong at Mount Tabor. Here's what they would say. Matt is the only pastor of the church. Rick can't be a pastor because he's not the senior pastor. I would argue with anybody. Rick is a pastor of this church. He is the youth and worship pastor. Amen. And does a phenomenal job doing both of those things. So some people say you can only have one pastor, everybody else is what. So now we have to sparse these words. So Dr. Greenway, who is the president of Southwestern Seminary, he offered a motion and he said this. The Baptist Faith and Message, this holy book that we claim, he says, all it says is this, that we must be closely aligned with the Baptist Faith and Message 2000 in order to be considered, it blew up the text, to be considered friendly cooperation with the SBC. It does not say that every church has to follow the Baptist Faith and Message every letter, every period, every dot. And what it says is you must closely align. And the reason is because we are autonomous. Every church gets to do what they want to do. Now, I would not do what Rick Warren did. Okay? We would not do that here. However, I have zero problem that Rick Warren did what he did. And I told one guy on Twitter, with Rick Warren in his years there, are you ready for this? His church has won 65,000 people to the Lord. started 90 churches in Orange County alone, and started over 1,000 churches worldwide in 25 years. When you've done that, you can say something to everyone. Until then, shut up. You ain't got nothing to say. What you doing? What you doing in your little church in Tennessee, and all you're doing is going to convention and causing waves. All the Baptist Faith and Message says is we have to closely align. Here's the kicker to it all. The Baptist Faith and Message says this about the Lord's Supper. That Southern Baptists have closed communion. Can I tell you this point out? A Southern Baptist church, most Southern Baptist churches do not do closed communion. Now, if you don't know what closed communion, we have open communion. I have crazy open communion. Debbie even doesn't like how open communion I am. Okay? Now, closed communion says this. We're going to have communion on Sunday, and you can only take communion if you are a member of this church. So if you're a Southern Baptist of another church and you come to be here Sunday and we happen to be doing Lord's Supper Sunday, you cannot partake of that Lord's Supper. You have to be a member of this church. Open communion says if you're a believer, then you can partake. If you're a Methodist but you're a believer, you know that, you can partake with us. If you're from another Southern Baptist church, absolutely you can take with us. Okay? So most Southern Baptist churches are open communion churches. But the Baptist Faith and Message calls for closed communion. Well, if Rick Warren is going to get disfellowshipped because he ordained 3 women to be pastors, who aren't preaching, by the way, then what's to stop somebody else from going, oh, well, Mount Tabor, they don't do closed communion. We have to vote them out next. It's like a slippery slope. And I think that's where the convention or the Baptist Faith and Message says closely aligned. We're closely aligned. We pretty much do everything and believe everything the Baptist Faith and Message says. Probably the only area that's different is maybe communion, because we're open. I go one step further and use communion as a way to evangelize. Like, I want everybody to partake because I want everybody to understand the significance, especially children, and parents to take that opportunity to explain what every element is and why they are partaking of it. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. It's between you and the Lord. I don't force everybody to take it, but I do allow anybody to take it. So I'm very, very open with my communion when we do it. Okay? So that's what Greenway said, was like, hey, we don't need to sparse the word pastor. What we need to figure out is what this closely aligned thing means. Well, it was voted down, which was shocked because Mueller and his little entourage stood up and spoke. But Greenway's motion was voted down. Well, what the committee that brought the recommendation to the floor said was, okay, we're going to pull our recommendation back. They took their motion back, which means now in limbo is Saddleback Church. And most likely it will be getting brought up in New Orleans next year. And most likely somebody's going to stand up and make a motion to disfellowship Saddleback, which is, again, like the worst thing that we could do is disfellowship a church over something like that. It's one thing to disfellowship a church like the one we did just recently here in Florida, because the pastor was, he was just crazy and doing some really stupid things. We disfellowshipped a church in Georgia a couple of years ago, the convention did, because they embraced racism. Like, they didn't just not deny it, they embraced it. Like, it was part of their mantra. Okay, you're out. Like, this is not even close to the same thing. So, some people see this as a liberal drift. I don't. I think that that there's the pastor of the church, and I don't have a problem. In fact, I used to call Debbie. I gave you the title of worship pastor or worship leader or something like that. You didn't like it. She didn't like it. But to me, that's what she was doing. What is the role of a pastor? I mean, as a lead pastor, and that's the thing. We could sparse out that word pastor. There's the office of pastor. My number one job is to preach. Right? That's just what Scripture says. My number one job is to preach. But doesn't a pastor care for people? Warn them, love them, lead them to Christ? Tell me one of those 4 things that Debbie hasn't done in her years here. Tell me one of those 4 things Rick hasn't done or doesn't do. Right? So they're fulfilling that role of a pastor-like person. So I have zero problem saying, hey, you're my worship pastor. I want you to know how serious I take your role. And Debbie knows I take that. I mean, if Debbie knows if the music doesn't go well, the preaching ain't going to go well. It piggybacks off each other. And Rick knows that, right? And so why not give some authority to those people that stand up here and lead us and see them in that light? And so next year it's going to come up again, but it's not a liberal thing. It's more of a definition thing. Some people are making, and there are people within our association that disagree with me with strong conviction. In fact, I had a discussion with one of them, and he finally said, "Matt, we're going to have to stop because we're going to disagree." Like, man, I hope it's not tense to even see him now, you know? But again, I don't know. I'm not ordaining Debbie to be a worship pastor, but I don't have a problem that Saddleback did. Because I also don't want Saddleback come over here and telling us what we can and can't do. Right? We're autonomous. We get to do what we want to do. So that was the Saddleback and Rick Warren issue there. And then next year we go to New Orleans. June 2023 we'll be in New Orleans. It was supposed to be in Charlotte, but it's not big enough in Charlotte, the convention center. So they made a decision to move us over to New Orleans with the Superdome and all of that. So, okay, so that's it. That's the convention, and like the 2 days convention. That was the big stuff that we discussed. Everything else was pretty simple and not confrontational. Women in ministry, the presidential election, and the sex abuse task force, which in the end was almost nominal. Everybody approved it. The biggest debate and the longest debate. And what I was listening to last Wednesday night while we started church was them debating Rick Warren's issues and what they were going to do about that. That's why I was having to tune in. So questions about egalitarianism, complementarianism, those roles and all of that, or opinions, the viewpoint that you have. Debbie's looking at her notes, checking her notes out, going back. And if you need to write those down, those words were egalitarianism. And there they are right there, complementarianism.
I mean, couldn't you find a few more letters to put in those words?
Listen, I had to spell check that like 3 times in Google because I just knew I spelled them wrong. But yeah, believe it or not, it's a hot issue. It's a hot issue. The egalitarian thing sounds good, right? Men and women are equal. And they are in some areas of our life, that is true. But in the church context, we do believe that the men are the leaders of the church. And Rick Warren even tweeted out, nobody asked me last week, but I have 18 elders and they're all men. Now I got to tell you all this. I tweeted, Monday night they started the attacks, and I tweeted out, I said, "Hey, at Rick Warren." I mean, hey, it's Rick Warren, you Saddleback Church. I'm like nobody, right? I'm like, "Hey, at Rick Warren, I want to apologize for the way you're being treated at SBC 22. I'm a Southern Baptist pastor, and I greatly appreciate your work." Tweeted it out. The next morning I wake up, and I'm looking at my phone. Rick Warren is following me on Twitter. I wasn't even following him on Twitter. He followed me first on Twitter. So now Rick Warren follows me.
Be
So
careful.
Yeah. So
Alex Kalorn once followed me too, and it really
didn't work out so well. So I told Shauna came in and I said, "Shauna, I just want you to know Rick Warren's following me on Twitter now." He's like follower number 74. And oh, by the way, Rick Warren has trained 1.1 million pastors in those 25 years. Yeah. So when he was done, there was a huge clap, and then he's tweeted out a couple times since then. So I'm hoping people just kind of calm down on this issue and let him do Saddleback the way Saddleback works. They're in the most liberal state. They're right there in LA, right, Orange County. They're in the people that are going out there and causing the problem are sitting over here in the Bible Belt, not reaching anybody for Jesus, and they're in the heart of Liberalville, right, out there in California, winning 65,000 people. Can we just let him do Saddleback the way he feels led? Yeah. And he's retiring on top of all of that. And the new pastor, they came in and like, oh, his wife. His wife does have the title of teaching pastor because she's going to be teaching and leading the women's ministry of Saddleback Church. I don't have a problem with that. Who's the leader of the church? It's the guy, right? Her husband is the lead pastor. He's taken Rick's spot as Saddleback. And so I think we just let Saddleback be Saddleback. So my motion next year, if it gets brought up, I'm going to offer an amendment to the motion. And I'm going to try to get on the microphone. It's really hard to get onto. And I'm going to make an amendment that we remove the name Saddleback. And we put, or any church that does not follow the Baptist faith message to the letter, and also develop a task force to go look at every church. And using the, if you have not sinned, you can throw the first stone as my supporting scripture. It is ridiculous that we would vote a church out like Saddleback.
Yeah.
It's just, it's unheard of. To me, it's unheard of.
Years and years ago, probably in the 80s, there was the deaconess debate.
Yes. Yeah.
And because the word servant, and Paul often mentioned women who were serving his ministry and used the word servant talking about him, which is the same word that means deacon, if I'm not right. If I'm right about that. And so, and I don't have a problem with a woman being a deacon if she's being a deacon to the women's ministry in the church.
Well,
it's
here's
just where it's being used at.
Exactly. Now, here's the other thing that's really funny to me. So I worked at Moffitt Cancer Center and Lakeland Regional Health as a chaplain. Both of my bosses, the head chaplain at both those facilities, were women. Both of them were ordained to ministry. Both of them had degrees from Southern Baptist seminaries. Now, they were all before the conservative resurgence. But here's the fact. They both had degrees from the same seminary I graduated from. And they both were ordained into the gospel ministry. And why? Because sometimes we need to do that. Okay? They may have been liberal, and they are. But we need women to be serving as chaplains in women's prisons, women's hospitals. Sometimes, here's the thing. You cannot be a board-certified chaplain in the United States without being ordained by your governing body. You can't do it. And so we have to have some avenue for women to be ordained to do certain ministry. There are some mission fields that desire and require a woman to do it. Our convention needs to allow ordained women to go off and serve in those roles. You cannot send a man into a female area of Islamic countries and expect them to talk to him. But you can send a woman in. I just think common sense has to override. And I may be wrong, and I know Scripture what it says, but I don't think I'm going against it. I just think, man, we have to become all things to all people is what Paul said. It doesn't mean we become a drunk, but it does mean whatever it takes to reach that person. And how dare we try to kick out a church like Saddleback after everything they've done for our convention, everything they've done for the kingdom? Come on. We're picking the wrong battle with the wrong people. So, just my personal opinion on that. So, hey, Phil.
Hey, before I came here, I was at the Methodist Church over by the post office.
I'm sorry to hear that. Go ahead.
I'd worked, I went to pick up the food. Furniture down there by McDonald's.
Yep.
Road, and brought food back, unloaded food and things. That's when I found out that people were picking up food at Tabor in the morning, and then coming at 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock over to my church, and their vehicle's full, and they're going through the box, and I said, hey, you ain't got time to go through the box, and I'm setting the box here, and I gotta go. And but the moral of the story, the pastor, Dan, we had church from 11 to 12.
Yeah.
And right after us, it was a Mexican church. And there was a Mexican lady as a pastor.
So, yeah, they're Methodists, so they do have women pastors.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then, coming down through it, Dan, pastor, followed the adoption of a boy named Dallas, Big Al.
Yeah.
That he followed him, and he was trying to follow another girl.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So a lot of times what will happen is what churches, and your Methodist and Catholic are structured very similarly, that there's a governing body, and so those pastors can be reassigned. And what they were doing, they would, if this pastor over here did something wrong, instead of dealing with it, they would simply move to another church and never tell the new church what they did at the old church. And we want to be much more open than that. And the Catholic Church has battled this now for a number of years. I told somebody, I said, I guess all those jokes that people used to tell from the Baptist pulpit need to shut up at this point, because we're now the same. I think I think time will find that the Methodists and Assemblies have the same problem. It's out there. It's just a matter of waiting for it to be discovered. But the Methodists have a hard time. They move pastors around like that and don't ever tell anybody. And usually it's a 2-year thing, so you go through them pretty quick. Baptists, we might want to fix that. Y'all get stuck with people for like 13, 14 years. So, hey, we're going to be done here. Thank y'all. If you have not seen out in the yard, man, make sure you walk out there and take a look. And if you haven't, walk out there and walk inside of it, and you'll go, wow, this thing is humongous out here, right? So be sure to walk out there. Tomorrow they put the windows and doors spots in, and then next week we put insulation and skin on. So maybe by Friday night we may have like a, hey, you're here at VBS, we want to show you our new building and show you kind of the idea, and we may have something where they can walk out and just walk in and see it. But other than that, nobody's going to be out there until we're ready for the grand opening. So anyway, we went vertical and it looks beautiful. So if you've not been out there, make sure you head out there. And we'll see you Sunday morning, if not tomorrow morning at the food bank. No, I'm sorry, Saturday, work day, 8:30. Saturday morning. 8:30. 8:30. I was like get too excited. 8:30 Saturday morning. Michelle, 8:15. I've been talking to you here at 8:45. You know that. Come on. Come on.
I've been being on time, thank you very much.
You are on time. Can you pick up the donuts for me? Okay.
No, I cannot.
You cannot.
No, I cannot.
Have a great week. Have a great week.
Go Lightning.
Yeah.
Let's go, Mom.
Yeah, you gotta go. Gotta go. What time's kickoff?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. Is it kickoff? Is that what it's called?
No.
What's it called?
Puck drop.
Puck drop? I'm not a hockey guy.
Puck drop.
But hey, I do hope the Lightning win, just so you know. I do hope the Lightning win. Just because I don't know who else to root for. So go Lightning. There is tackling, so I do think I would like it. But anyway, y'all have a great night.
It's fun. Hitting, fighting.
I had a
Stress
friend years
relief.
ago
Stress
wanted me to
relief.
go with her, and I would go to a couple games.
It's so
And
much
the
fun.
first time, well, one, it's very, very cold.
Yes.
She's like, what is the new building going to be for? What is this?
It's gonna be,
It's not like a football uniform where they're,
several things.
I mean, they've got those big jerseys, and they've got these pads, and I'm like,
It's also gonna be for
Yeah, exactly.
sports activities and things.
But
like
even then, I was
that.
just like,
Any kind of community.
It's very fast.
Our fellowship hall is just too small.
Sorry,
Too much.
Call out.
how is it? I can't follow the puck fast enough.
Building.
I need the, I need
And my
the.
granddaughter plays, so
We know.
I've had them learn. Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I know like when it was all first being talked about a long time ago, I was here some then, but I couldn't remember what exactly it was.
Family Life Center, we use that term sometimes.
Okay.
So, yeah, we just kept saying, God, are you ever gonna put the building up? I mean, no. So, I was excited when I drove up, hey, Phil, how are you doing?
I'm gonna walk out there and
You've been making this thing?
I've been, yep, and not falling out. Yeah, so far, so good. Yeah, you too, Phil. Haven't seen you in a long time. Yeah, you doing okay? Oh, yeah, yeah.
They haven't said anything.
Oh, okay. You still got your truck? No, so how you getting around? So how you getting around?
Bicycle.
You got a bicycle?
Yeah.
I was in dark front on the paper, whatever it was.
Right.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Good to see you, Phil.
Right, you too.
Telling you I'm available. Anyway, go ahead.
So here's the question. So when Jimmy and I got married, then I started coming, and I got a phone, and then you go, you get on.
I thought it might be this year, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe rounds, we don't know. I'll have to ask her. Are you going?
Or is my mom right in there? Is she right in there?
Oh, that's an old one. Oh, no, sometimes we do it.
Oh, she didn't leave.
Man, you can open this door while I'm here?
Please. Yeah, because I gotta go.
Okay.
There's a key in it.
That's okay.
Okay.
By saying that, I knew.
So you're leading, so he's not leading, so what do you do?
Yeah.
You be faithful. You be faithful, and the goal hopefully is that we will see them.
She's coming.
We'll figure it out. And
So just keep doing what I'm doing. All right. You ready, Mama? Yeah. Let's go. Pump drop. Okay.
Hey. Oh, that's okay. Did y'all get anybody yet? Yeah, no, I'm just finished with church. I'm in Kathleen area for my church now, so. Okay. Hang on one second, let me get you a notepad real quick. Okay. Okay, go ahead. I can't, go ahead. Yes, sir, go ahead. Okay. Okay. Do we have the last name?
I don't have anything. I got the staff page, request call, but yeah, you can call that sergeant.
Okay.
And I said,
Okay.
it is, Sergeant Wright, and that number would be 701-2757.
701.
Or 757.
Gotcha. I'm literally about 5 minutes from there, so I'll be there heading right now. Thank you. All right. I gotta go. Timberlake Road, like right out here, so it shouldn't be too long.
I brought you your shoes. Where are they? Where did I bring you somebody else's shoes? I looked, but I couldn't see anybody.
It may have been Jessie because I didn't see her.
Jessie, she went with children's, so after.
Oh, after she left.
After she left.
Okay. Let's go and get off of that.
What happened? I won't.
It's a great
Hey,
thing.
who was back there with you?
Nobody.
And who did you have to left? Nothing?
Yes, I know
Did you have that remote?
Yeah, the
Okay. Because I was looking back there, I didn't see him in the remote.
Oh, gotcha.
I didn't see mine.
Yeah, he is helping out.
Turkey?
Well, he was trying to test his mouth, like, you think that's mine? Usually, like, pops in and out. You were coming back.
I'll be back. So he just, Pam stopped by that night. He got talking. And I said something about going to North Carolina. Anyway, she said, where are you going? I was like, oh, small town Hall Park.
I think he had the dog.
We just have one. That small.
Yeah.
It's tiny. But they're very,
Yeah.
And, she's like, I have an uncle that lives in Sparta.
Oh, wow.
So, of course, I had the map and everything, we're looking around and everything. There's, because I go and get around to just the downtown area, but I don't know all road numbers and names and whatever. So anyways, on my Google Maps, I show her, I come through this, it's the road before you turn onto the Opportunity Road, which is where John's house. There's a church right there. It's in walking distance of their house. She's like, yeah, that's the church. Brian played at that church before. I'm like, what?
That's so crazy.
I said, not only are Frank and up there,
Right.
but
Obviously, because they're right there, too.
like probably several years ago, they were going to the church one Sunday.
How funny is that?
All the people out. Yeah.
Free shirts, dude.
That's all. You know. Mommy?
Hi, Sylvia! That's hilarious.
The odds are back on.
Yeah!
But the camera.
Kathy, you got the offering?